released a new cocktail book called Twist. That's it over my shoulder. Yeah, so I'm excited to talk about the book and probably make a cocktail or two. I'd say it's an approachable guide to creating your own cocktails. If I could expand on that a little, it's obviously a lot of recipes. There's info in there on what sort of tools and what sort of ingredients you might want to get, and it's a lot of different classic cocktails and then twists on those classics. But it's all meant to kind of be a jumping off point for experimentation when it comes to cocktails. So it's very much using like classic cocktails like an Old Fashioned, Martini, Margarita, those like tried and true cocktail recipes, and using those as templates for making new cocktails or coming up with your own. So so it's definitely a lot of different recipes you can follow, but it's also just kind of arranged in a way to kind of get you thinking about how to create your own cocktails based off of those kind of original classic recipes. But for me, like a lot of my work, so photography, all my recipe creation, a lot of that, it's all kind of lived online. It's been for different brand clients, I've blogged for a lot of years, sharing, recipes and cocktails and all of that. So I kind of wanted to make something that felt a little more permanent, something that someone could take home versus just finding a photo on the internet or something. So so it was like a mix with that, with also just wanting to put together like a really easy, approachable guide, like I said, of kind of how to make cocktails. There's a lot of different cocktail books out there, of course. So there's some that I really enjoy that I would recommend to friends who are kind of like, oh, this was a little much, or this was a little too like intimidating, or it was kind of like almost too nerdy sort of thing, where I was like, okay, well, maybe I can kind of make a guide of kind of my approach to how I make drinks, but do it in a way that is very visually pleasing. It's a lot of beautiful photos in this book. And then I can flip through a few pages. It's a lot of just like kind of full bleed pages of cocktails that are very pretty to look at, but it's also just like, at least hopefully not very overwhelming. There's a lot of intro material on different spirits and how to make drinks, but I try to keep it to like 1 or 2 pages on each of those sections. So it's very digestible, something that whether you're brand new to cocktails or you have some experience, you can pick it up and get something out of it. So that's the goal, at least, and gotten some good feedback on it so far, but I guess only time will tell if people agree. One of them that's new to the book that I really enjoy, and a few of the book signings I've done in bars, that's kind of been the recipe people have gone to, is called the Modern Medicine. I can flip to it here. It's like the 3rd recipe in the book, but it's kind of a mix between a paper plane cocktail and a penicillin. It's made with bourbon, Aperol, lemon juice, a little bit of Demerara sugar, and then it has a smoky Islay Scotch float on top. Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, I happen to have all this stuff right here. So, so this is a shaken cocktail. So I have my cocktail shaker here. So first for this one, we're doing 2 dashes of aromatic bitters. These are just very commonly found Angostura aromatic bitters. I have them in this nice little dasher bottle, but they usually come in a bottle with a little yellow cap. And then we're doing 1/2 ounce of rich Demerara syrup. So that's a syrup that I make myself. So it's made with 2 parts of Demerara sugar. So it's like a darker kind of raw sugar, and 1 part water. So I like using kind of this syrup when I'm making cocktails with aged spirits. Just tends to pair really nicely with whiskey and cognac and things like that. So again, this is 1/2 ounce. All right, so we have our bitters, our syrup, and then next we're doing 3/4 ounce of fresh lemon juice. I'm very much like, always use fresh citrus if you can, if you have access to it. Just makes cocktails a lot a lot nicer. There's just something about freshly squeezed citrus that there's just more like life to it. It just has like this, yeah, it just tastes better, you know, than like a pre-bottled thing in my opinion. So, so we have our lemon juice. Now we're going to do just a ½ ounce of Aperol. And we're still waiting on technology to catch up to where I can share a cocktail, you know, via the internet, but I'll have to taste it for you and, you know, tell you if it's good. But honestly, this cocktail would be good with rye as well. Bourbon is what it's in the book, but let's just try making it with rye because I have done that before and I enjoyed it. So, so I'm doing 1.5 ounces of rye whiskey for this one. Again, we have our bitters, our demerara sugar, fresh lemon juice, a little bit of Aperol, and rye whiskey in there. I'm going to grab some ice, so I'll stick that. Cool, so I just have a small part of my shaker, put about 2/3 full of ice, and then I'm going to put the top part on and make sure it's sealed together and give it a good shake. And generally when it comes to shaking cocktails, especially with a full metal shaker like this, I kind of shake it until it just starts to lightly frost over on the outside. So, and then I have a rocks glass here that I put some fresh ice in. Strain that into our glass here. And then we have to do a smoky scotch float on the top here. So I'm gonna grab some Ardbeg 10. All right, so I'm just going to take a bar spoon here. And generally when you do a float on a cocktail, you know, I like to pour it kind of right over the back end of a bar spoon. Just helps the liquid kind of land softly on the top of the beverage and not get mixed in. So I'm just gonna do just a little bit here. And our garnish here, and just for a simple garnish, do a little lemon twist. There we have our modern medicine, my current favorite from the book. Personally, I just really like that kind of peaty scotch Aperol pairing for some reason. You know, bittersweet citrus element. So it's very like approachable cocktail. One of my bartender friends refers to it as crushable, where it's just something that like you can make it and it's just like it's very easy to drink whether you're into, you know, cool cocktails or not. It's just like a very easy approachable cocktail that's just enjoyable to crush. So yeah. Yeah, so the book is divided up, starting with just kind of a, you know, basic intro of kind of my approach to making cocktails. Of kind of how I started out was at home. I'm just like, oh, well, this ingredient sounds good mixed with this, and I didn't have a whole lot of success. But as I was talking with bartenders around where I live, they were like, well, start just by making like classic cocktails. And they're like, from there, it's easy. So that sounded kind of boring to me because I was like, oh, classic drinks, they all kind of sounded stuffy in my mind. But as I started making martinis, old fashions, those sort of drinks, and really trying to figure out how to make them well, that's, like I said, where it very much was like, okay, that kind of gave me these starting points for experimentation. And, you know, even something as simple as taking an old fashioned and being like, oh, I'm gonna do, you know, cardamom bitters instead of aromatic bitters, and maybe I'll, you know, use aged rum instead of whiskey. Just like little stuff like that, we start swapping out different ingredients, and it's still essentially an old fashioned, but it becomes something different as well. So for me, that was kind of like my gateway into cocktails and mixology. So that's kind of how the book starts, and kind of explaining kind of how I got into it and that approach. And then it goes into what sort of tools you need, things like shakers, strainers, jigger for measuring, just kind of your basic bar tools. Then it goes more into ingredients, like talking about different bitters, different base spirits, and kind of why you might want certain ones. It's not necessarily like, here, buy all this stuff. It's more like, hey, if you want to make certain cocktails, here's the certain spirits you might want to get. So it's all trying to kind of lay out the groundwork for like being able to have enough to experiment and to create stuff at home. And then from there, like the bulk of the book is cocktail recipes with kind of like these little, kind of intros and kind of explanations of each one, along with a big photo. But it's laid out where, there's shaken cocktails in one section, which are, more cocktails that have citrus and tend to be lighter, more refreshing. Then it goes into kind of stirred, spirit-forward cocktails, more your nightcaps, like an Old Fashioned, Sazerac, those sort of things. Then it goes into like effervescent, bubbly cocktails. We have simple builds, so cocktails that only have like 2, maybe 3 ingredients that you can kind of make in the glass. Maybe ones that you don't have to measure as precisely. You can just kind of combine a few things that are pretty easy to make. And then we have some tropical cocktails at the end that are kind of the more some tiki drinks and stuff that have maybe some crazier ingredients or a lot of smoke or stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of the essential layout. Yeah, it was a lot. I mean, so with each section, so since we were talking about shaken drinks, it kind of breaks down further where there are a fair amount of classic cocktails. So I didn't, make those up. So it's, like I said, it starts with the whiskey sour, then, there's a daiquiri in there, a margarita. So with all those, I have these kind of classic recipes. A lot of them are very similar templates. And then for often the ones I created, they are twists, hence the name twist. They're twists on those classics. So like if you look at the table of contents, you'll have, shaken cocktails, whiskey sour, and then you'll have, like these different versions of a whiskey sour underneath that. They're all their own page, but if you're looking at the table of contents, it's all very kind of organized with like all those sections kind of have like their leading classics, and then the twists come after those. And yeah, most of those I came up with or kind of developed myself, but I also pulled a few from some bartender friends. So you'll see there's a few cocktails that also have like a small text under them, say by Jeffrey Morgenthaler, who's a author, very well known mixologist himself, who he's also based in Portland where I live, so we've kind of become friends. So I included one of his recipes in there. There's several kind of bartenders in town who I just really respect and really enjoy kind of their approach to the cocktail. So there's some of those recipes too. So that helps because, yeah, it was a ton of work just coming up with that many recipes and trying to like make sure they're all really good, before you actually print them, So yeah, so it was definitely a lot of work on the front end coming up with it, but it was nice to be able to pull a few recipes from friends too. That definitely helped with the load of it. Yeah, that's a great question. So the very first thing with writing the book was starting with the cocktail recipes. I mean, we kind of did a rough outline of kind of some intro material, but the main focus was like, okay, what recipes, how are we going to format them, all of that. So once we kind of landed on this template idea of kind of sharing these classic templates, sour format, old fashioned format sort of thing, and kind of was able to kind of come up with these basic, like I said, we have, shaken cocktails, kind of stirred, spirited ones, bubbly, effervescent. They're just kind of like the larger categories. From there, I just tried to look into like, okay, what are like the most well-known drinks that are like in each of those categories? Kind of the ones that like, kind of your knee-jerk bar orders. Like you sit down at a bar and you're not sure what to order. Like, I'll get an Old Fashioned. I like those. Or, I'll get a margarita. Those are great. So it's trying to just go with those like truly classic recipes that have been around for decades, some of them, centuries maybe, and be like, okay, what are those like core recipes? Because those are the ones that have kind of, stood the test of time versus like, the Sex on the Beach or whatever from the 90s. That was kind of like, people thought that was fun and got that for a few years, but now it's like, people don't really order that anymore, So try to just go with these like core recipes that are truly considered classics. So. Yeah, I'd probably say, and this is in the book too, uh, is to just figure out like what drink or drinks you enjoy making or drinking, and just focus on those starting out. I feel like a lot of people come to me or message me and be like, okay, like give me a list of all the things I need to, have a good bar and, make a bunch of things, which if you have money to burn, great. Most of us sure don't. Where I definitely made the mistake starting out where like, I was kind of reading books. I was like talking to bartenders too, and they're like, oh, well, you really need, this Amaro or this liqueur or this thing like that. That goes in so many cocktails where it's like, okay, that's, $45 US. That's kind of a lot for one bottle, something I've never heard of, but I'll get it because this book says I should. And then ends up sitting on this shelf for 2 years because I'm like, I don't enjoy it. I don't make drinks with it. So that's where I tell people like, hey, if you really enjoy making margaritas or drinking margaritas, just focus on getting the things to make a really good margarita. So get a good tequila, get, oftentimes put orange liqueur in margaritas or agave syrup, kind of up to you. Get fresh limes, maybe some salt for the rims if you want to do that. That's kind of optional too, but like just get good ingredients for making the drink that you like drinking or that you like making for people. And just focus on that starting out, because if you just buy all the things that books tell you to get or that people tell you to get, you might end up spending a lot of money on stuff that you don't end up using. And sometimes there's cocktails that you're like, oh, this is a really unique cocktail. It has an ingredient that I may never use. And that's kind of up to you if that's worth it. But for a lot of people starting out, I'm like, you can't just go, spend hundreds of dollars at the liquor store. That just doesn't make sense. So, I know I'm saying this with like walls of liquor behind me, but like this is after like years and years and years of doing this stuff, where it's like, you don't need this massive bar cart or bar shelf to make good drinks. So that's kind of my best advice. That's kind of always where I go with people when they're starting out. Just to encourage them, like you don't have to spend a ton of money. Just try to focus on making one or two really good drinks, doing it well, and getting what you need to do those.